Hello, and welcome to the Stacking Dingers Show, your home for all things MLB best ball, the focus on Underdog. I'm your host, Matthew, aka Sheep, aka Dark Sheep. You can, of course, find me on the internet at D4RKSH33P_. And tonight we have a returning friend, Brendan Tuma. Online. You can find his work over at Baseball America. You can find his personal Substack at brendantuma.substack.com. And he is, of course, the head of MLB info at Underdog. Welcome, Brendan.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited for this. I feel like I've spent so much of the off season just in a lab, hunkered away, fighting off winter, staying inside, like truly. And I have just tried to look at, the player pool from every possible angle, from projections to past performance to surface level stats to underlying metrics. And I feel like now that it's spring training and we're about a month away from games that matter, I feel in a very, very good spot with, maybe not being able to, no one's going to go 100% in player analysis, but I feel like I really understand the bets I'm making. And I think that that's like half the battle and part of the equation that I don't hear talked about as much.
Okay. Yeah. And tonight we are talking the first chunk of pitchers by Underdog ADP. Before we get into it, Brent, how does it feel to be back, having MLB news to report on?
Yeah, it was really like interesting off season for like kind of just the evolution of what I've been doing at work and at Underdog. But I felt like it never stopped in a lot of ways. Just the off season, the way it was like Soto happened so early, Sasaki happened like perfectly in the middle, and then we got the late Bregman stuff. To me, those were kind of the three tent poles of the off season. And yeah, now to just like be in spring training games, that like I feel like from pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training games actually starting always sneaks up on me. It feels like they get into games almost like quicker than what I'm ready for, but I'm sure like those guys are chomping at the bit even more than us.
Yeah, and as players now, we get those little updates now, and when you see a new one on your favorite player, you gotta hold your bowels in a little bit. Hopefully, it's not a negative news note that you didn't notice popping up.
I was gonna say I'm bracing for the pitcher injuries, especially elbows and shoulders. I think the two we've had so far, the Mets guys, it hasn't been elbow at least yet. But this time last year, Yuri Perez was still healthy. I'm trying to think who else. Like Garrett Cole was still healthy.
Do we have Bradish yet?
Bradish was like right when we reported spring training, but a bunch of those guys. And then in the first week, Strider went down, Bieber went down. So pitcher injuries is something that I have a lot to say on for this episode. And yeah, I mean, I saw the Sean Manaea news today, and it was like, oh, I guess like might have to calm down a little bit of enthusiasm that I may have had for him. And tomorrow morning there could be another pitcher injury that throws some of what we said for a loop.
Yeah, and with him, it's almost like you wish it would have been worse, because now you're like in this limbo zone with him, where it's like, is he going to be valuable? Like, he should be back and still contribute. Where's his value? Like, it's really hard to tell a player's value, and I'm sure we'll get into it with the guys coming back from injury too, like trying to figure out people's value.
Definitely. But yeah, I mean, I'm like, pitching is, I think within Underdog and Best Ball, it's been so discussed, so heavily discussed about, the optimal is probably waiting for pitchers, even if that doesn't mean, taking an extreme approach on late round pitchers. It probably means not being very overweight starting pitchers in the first 3-4 rounds. Like I feel like that's like the one thing we could maybe like eliminate is suboptimal. But from there, I do think that there's an edge to be had, not so much from just the roster construction or at what point in the draft you're taking pitchers, but from actually figuring out who is better than who, because it's not as there's a lot of variance to it, but it's not as much of like a random number generator as I sometimes hear people discussing.
Yeah, for sure. What you started there leads right into our first slide. Thanks, Billy, for putting these together again. Basically, what you said, everybody's come to the same conclusion, and we now have 3 pitchers taken in the first 4 rounds, and then we start getting a little bit heavier, and then round 8 we have kind of like the big pitcher run starts, and then it's pretty heavy from there on.
I think like you obviously and Billy and everyone else drafting in the public space has done way more drafts than I have just from the nature of being behind the scenes. And one thing that I noticed is in those maybe like rounds 5, 6, 7 is when it started, maybe a little bit of like outfield dead zone type feeling. And I think maybe that's where the opportunity is. And it looks like, the market has somewhat identified that. But I would make a case there's some pitchers that could maybe even move up a little bit, a round or two, sort of thing.
Yeah, I have been in general trying to get in earlier this year than I was last year, just because it's been pushed down so much. Just to try and get some of those top tier ones that you're getting in round 5, and you still have 4 great projected bats ahead of them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's do it. Let's jump over here. We have, if you haven't seen our setups here, we have player name, player team, and they're ordered by ADP. The positional rank is which position or which pitcher they are ranked as, and then the round that they're going in. We are using it to kind of keep in the same idea that we used for the hitters. We're going to use the bat for pitchers here. We have what they're projected for in underdog total points. As I've said, the caveat to this number is the whole season. It is not necessarily the underdog best ball season, but this is an idea to give us, what sort of expectations projection systems have. And then, breaking it down from there, we have per game projected points, and along with the projected innings, the per game being the thing that we trust more out of a projection system, and the innings being more of a guesswork / variable / it could go different ways. Pitchers, we kind of have. It's not like a position player whose opportunity changes in terms of volume. So, like, if somebody gets hurt ahead of one position player, they'll get more at bats. That doesn't really happen for most of the pitchers that we're going to be talking about, especially tonight. Most of them kind of are locked in, but this is more saying this is what we think based on previous years, health, and that kind of stuff. So this is the variable thing.
Yeah, I would say like the biggest takeaway from the innings is not to blindly trust that number and say that's the most likely amount of innings someone's going to throw. I would look at that and I would say, okay, this is what that projection system has for this pitcher. And to be honest, like everyone in the fantasy baseball world uses mostly the same publicly available projections on Fangraphs. So if you think that one of those inning totals is way off, either too high or too low, then you make that mental adjustment, and that could be, a small competitive advantage.
Yeah, and then we have we talked to earlier in the season when we talked to Bubba and Bloom and Vlad Sedler. We were talking about the simplest stat to look at a pitcher. So we put they talked about K minus BB percent. So that's what we got here. And then we do have kind of, just if you're interested in how pitchers get to their score, we also have the K per game. And then we have just sort of for discussion, the Stuff Plus from Fangraphs, the Saris version. So that's what we're working with. If you see NAs there, that's because we don't have that data. So don't get confused there. All right, let's do it. Paul Skeens, he's good, Brendan. Can he separate enough that you want to take him in the second round?
Yeah, I think like a lot of what I've focused on with looking at pitchers is just trying to get like the order of them right, and trying to honestly more important than the order, like bucket them in terms of these are pitchers that could provide great ratios and strikeout upside, but I'm a little shakier on the innings. And then there's like your quality start, durable Logan Webb types, and not just having those two buckets, but then continuing to bucket and just kind of push people together. And so of course, at the top, Paul Skeens is he has all the ratio stuff, and he doesn't yet have injury concerns. So that alone just makes him such a unicorn. I guess the way I would describe my stance on him, if I was, max entering the dinger, would be not zero. I think there's when people talk about fades, there's a big difference between asking yourself, do you want 0% of this, or do you just want to be underweight on this player? And for his, if a different pitcher was going in the second round, I might have a different answer, but I don't like it. Just someone I don't want to have zero of. I think is the best way to put it.
Okay. Yeah, and Tariq Skubal being there as the number 2 makes a lot of sense to me. You're talking about getting the order right. It makes sense. But he, where you said Skeens has no injury history. Skubal has some. You go back, past that. That was his knock last year coming in, and why he was drafted a lot later. Is because we hadn't seen him be excellent for a long time.
For sure. And I think like just to jump ahead to like Wheel even, just because again, I think Skeens and Skubal, like again, like they're going really early, but both of them are just so dominant. Like again, it's a not zero situation for me. They both have great parks. There's just like so many factors working in their favor. And Skubal is like, I try to think of like pitcher injuries. Like once you're healthy for a couple of years, like that goes away, especially when you prove to be durable. Skubal didn't miss any time last year. I think like Zach Wheeler exemplifies that really well. He used to be the poster boy for a young pitcher who couldn't stay healthy. He missed 2 straight years at one point. And now, if you would have started playing fantasy baseball a few years ago, you'd be like, this guy has been a durable veteran the entire time out. So like he's a great example. I just remembering that he had a Tommy John surgery and that there were complications from it it's a good reminder to how quickly the narrative about, some of the injury prone guys can change.
Yeah, and the stuff plus is the same for the last 3 years, so the skill has not really declined as he's hit that workload. Even add in playoff runs too. He's got even more innings than you think when you go and look on Fangraphs at it. So yeah, he seems reliable. In the 4th round, I'll be honest, I haven't gotten to the first 3 guys very much at all. You say not zero, and I might have zero Wheeler.
I would say even at the elevated prices, I would rather have more Skeens and Skubal than Wheeler. I just think that those two separate a little bit more than he does. I know if you're gonna, show me last year's stats that Wheeler was right there with them, but I just think from a go, like I view Wheeler as last year was like the full culmination of like everything that could go right. Like he hit, whatever you want to call it, his 95th percentile outcome. And I'm just not banking on that again going forward. Whereas I think Skeens and Skubal, the skills are so loud. The Wheeler skills are incredible as well. Don't get me wrong, but it's just they have a little bit more margin for error. I feel like, and so yeah, I'm with you there on being a little softer on Wheeler in general.
Yeah, you talk about strikeouts being there. We got Dylan Cease next, or up to ADP 50 now. This is where we start getting into our 5th round guys, and they start going off the board a little more.
So you're in the streets more than me. This one really surprised me for him to be number 4. I don't know. Has there been discussion about that you've heard or been a part of about why him? Because not that everything needs to compare to Fantasy Pros consensus ranks, but this was the one that for Underdog it looks like he made the biggest jump.
Yeah, for sure. He, I think we have this profile of guy, the Blake Snell, the Dylan Cease, these guys that we think have walk issues. And Dylan Cease last year, he dropped like 1 walk per 9. And he's in San Diego. He's got a solid base. Like, I think people like the strikeouts, and they feel comfortable because he's a high volume guy. He hasn't had any much injury history at all, and he has a team to support him. Whereas when he was a White Sox, people focused on the negatives. But I do. It is interesting because I don't know what you think about how sustainable the walks going down really are for him, because he's always had the strikeouts in DFS. So he's been a guy that had previously could really hurt you with walks and then giving up the home run and stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. If he was where I feel like he maybe should be more, just based on consensus rankings and other platforms, would be like, I really like Dylan Cease this year. Being the fourth pitcher just makes it like really, really hard. But his innings the past 4 years, 189, 177, 184, 165. I think because he's so volatile with the walks, he gets labeled sometimes as being this risky high strikeout pitcher that might not always deliver everything you want in a true ace. But he's been a lot more durable than at least I've been giving him credit for the past year or so. So, like you said, it makes sense. It might even be efficient technically, but it does seem like a little bit high, and I wish it wasn't. But at the same time, like I said, like I like him. He's got that crazy 2-star upside in any given week.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the K per game number, and he's up there with these other guys here that we have more health questions and have worse health histories. So I think that's part of it. I think people just feel comfortable after seeing a season where he improved. Yeah, but it is interesting. I think calling him out as an archetype of pitcher that we want to target later in the draft. Snell being the other, the previous year's version of this. These guys that have this reputation of having bad outings due to walks. I don't know, control or consistency, whatever one you want to say about it. But it's an interesting archetype of guy to think about. Maybe there's another guy like this later. I can't think of any off the top of my head that I'm targeting this year, but last year, if you wanted to draft Garrett Crochet, you could tell yourself, hey, maybe he has the snap to it season. And similar thinking archetypes, the Scooble archetype, where maybe there's a guy later that we haven't seen. And Chris Sale is another example, guys that have questionable health history that have put it all together for a full year. Those are two guys that we're drafting a lot higher than last year because of we knew they were good, and then when we see them pitch for a whole season, we're like, oh yeah, we like those guys, and then they rise up. So those are two archetypes to be looking later on of guys that we might want to target to rise for next year.
Crochet's, I think, if I'm looking at that correctly, on the K- walk, it looks like it's the highest, even ahead of like Skeens and Scooble. And I'm a Red Sox fan, so it's a little bit of a disclaimer, but it really is. I think Scooble's a great comparison because he was someone going into last year. We were like, okay, it was pretty, amazing, but can he hold up to the one thing that I really want to emphasize about Crochet with the innings and the injury concern is he did not get hurt at all last year. The White Sox purposely, the second half, I think the last 2 months, were only letting him start 4 innings at a time, 3 innings at a time, whatever it was. And he was talked openly at the time about how that threw him off because he's been built up this whole season to go 6-7 innings if needed, and then all of a sudden it's getting cut short and he's playing on quite literally the worst team ever while all that's going on. And I'm just not holding any of that against him. Like when he made one adjustment. I think he had a little bit of a homer problem early in the year. on the sweeper or the cutter, and then he moved to the cutter more. And then even late in the year, people are talking about he added a new pitch. He comes from an organization, for as crazy as the White Sox are, like they've done some good stuff pitching wise in recent years. And then I just really trust Boston's pitching infrastructure. They probably don't even need to tell him anything, but should there any be tweak or adjustment that needs to be made throughout the year, I do really trust him. And so, yeah, I think this is one like he's number 3 for me. So
Okay.
I would move him up a couple.
Yeah. So I think if you're mentioning his last, even though they're limiting the amount in a start, he still got to 146. So having 152 projected here seems perhaps light. If we're talking about good health outcomes, he can get more innings, more starts. And I don't know about the total depth of the Red Sox, but the they have to pitch him because they're gonna want to win, right? They're in again this year.
Yeah, and he doesn't have an extension yet. He's talked about wanting to see what he can do for a full season. I think it can change so quickly because, like you mentioned with Scooble, like this time last year, we there was a lot of questions about that, and but there wasn't like there's a big difference, and this is where the injury stuff gets a little cloudier. But there's, in my opinion, a big difference between someone like Crochet versus someone like Chris Sale versus someone like Glass now versus someone coming back from Tommy John like Shane McClanahan. Like all these, like I don't think, if there's one thing that I have really been emphasizing in my own pitcher analysis, it's that it's not just are you injury prone or not. It's I really want to know what the exact injury was, when it happened. Have you had setbacks? Like all that stuff. And we'll get into that with some of these guys. But yeah, the overall point is the injury. Like if Crochet goes out and throws 180 innings this year, like then he's Scooble going into next year, and it's not a thought anymore.
Yeah, he is, of the guys we've talked about, he's the guy I've taken the most so far, because I think there is that potential up arrow on him, and I'm still not getting heavy in the 5th round on pitchers, but he's one, and we'll get to one a little bit later, that I have a lot of. And yeah, I think that when we talk about him, the scary part is not so much the health history for me. It's more he just had for the first time that he threw that many innings. Like it was a big jump of innings from anything previous to that. So I think that's more concerning to me. But yeah, I'm just firing for the 180 inning season potential. Next guy here, Logan Gilbert, ADP 56. I have 0 of. Brendan. Is that am I getting a little crazy here?
No, I mean I don't think he doesn't fall in the Crochet bucket. I think like someone like Crochet, like just the skills are so. I'm gonna say he could win Cy Young, and it's not like Logan Gilbert couldn't, but I think the Crochet skills pop a little more, and that always makes me feel a little queasier about getting 0 sort of thing compared to a Logan Gilbert. I think one thing about the Seattle guys is Mike Petriello of MLB.com did an article this offseason that just really popped with me about how Safeco or whatever it's called now is basically pitching version of Coors. And when you think about it that way, it kind of does change your perception on Mariners hitters and pitchers, pretty, convincingly. And so for as much credit as we want to give Rockies hitters spike week upside, like I think the Mariners guys, some of the home road splits, when you start digging into them, especially like Bryce Miller, for instance, I almost prefer it that way, because then when I do get the home start, they're more likely to hit my lineup. Obviously, you don't want to get into that too early here with Gilbert being one of the first pitchers off the board. But I guess, yeah, that's my one note on what makes him a little different or a little unique. I'd maybe look at the schedule to see, how many home games Seattle has during the Underdog playoffs or something like that.
Yeah, part of my blindness on him is just like Logan Gilbert, Bryce Miller, George Kirby, all kind of are the same pitcher in my head sometimes, because they came, they kind of came up as a package.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm looking at Logan Gilbert here, I'm just thinking, I can take Kirby or Miller later. I know they're not the same guy, so that might be wrong. But and you look at the projections here, he's total underdog points per game. There's a reason he's going here.
For sure. And again, like you said, the health, it's like any pitcher can get hurt at any time. So everything that at least I say from here on out, like I want it to be known that I know that I'm going to talk a little bit more, definitively about some of this stuff, but I will acknowledge like anyone, even someone with Gilbert's track record could get hurt at any moment.
Yeah.
But that being said, like you just look at the past few innings, the past few seasons by innings count, and it just makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside.
Yeah. Corbin Burns is someone that seems to be a bit polarizing. Eno, Saris on Rates and Barrels is one of the few people I think I've heard come out in favor of Corbin Burns this year. A lot of people are talking about the drop in strike rate, and swinging strike rate for the last few years has been kind of a consistent thing. He goes now to Arizona, which should be a good place for him to pitch. He's ADP 58, the last one here in round 5. And he does not project. This first page, he's the lowest in the K per game, and his total projection kind of reflects that. What do you think about him going to Arizona and the declines we've seen?
Yeah, I think entering September last year, they started because he was going to be a free agent. The Orioles were kind of scuffling. Those articles started to pop up about Burns and what was wrong. And then he pretty quickly turned it around. And I think he's talked about like refinding his cutter finally. And that just like unlocked everything. And he said it so convincingly, and he said it at the time when it happened. And then everything changed. So I do tend to buy that. It's a little weird that it, took that long to rediscover it or whatnot, and what happens if he loses that feeling again. And I generally don't love players first year of a big contract, just give them that transition year. But at the same time, like similar to Gilbert, like he's proven to be healthy. I don't think, outside of just going nuts in the finals, that missing out on Burns is a killer. He seems just so similar to me to kind of this 6 through 10 11 range, whatever it is. And so yeah, I don't know, I like him, I don't not like him. The profile just seems very similar to me of some of these top guys, and I guess what that says to me, if I was shopping in this range, then yeah, just try to like mix him up, get a little bit of each sort of thing, instead of necessarily going all in on Logan Gilbert and completely ignoring Corbin Burns. Like that just doesn't feel right to me. I would want to split it up between them.
Yeah, part of the Gilbert thing for me is that I am taking Burns here. I do think he has the ability to move up the board for next year. I don't know, but I'm still, the old Brewers fan in me is still cheering for him, and part of it is hoping that he, the corrections that he made last year stick. But I get why people are concerned with him at this price, because we go to the next guy, Cole Reagans. I have him, Crochet, Burns, and Reagans. I have all about the same amount, a little bit over the field, like 10, 11%. Again, I'm not totally shopping in this basket every draft, which is why I'm not like super overweight on anyone. But put him in the Garrett Crochet camp for me. The young guy that I think, removed from some injury stuff, has an upward arrow on him.
Yeah, and so I think what the most surprising thing I found from Reagans this offseason, I've been following Jeff Zimmerman of Fangraphs. He writes a book called The Process, where he just a whole book about fantasy baseball and trying to figure out what's most important to be predictive. And he made these health grades that he's used in Eno's rankings before, and I've been paying really close attention to his studies on pitcher health grades the past 2 years. Just really kind of, he's had success with them, and even from a forward thinking perspective. And I've tried to really hone in on maybe try to capture some of what he's looking for in those, because I think it's a really good resource. And so he has an A for this year for 2025, and that just like shocked me. And I went back and looked at some of Reagan's history, because I felt like when he started breaking out, all anyone talked about was the two Tommy Johns, or just like all the elbow trouble, all the missed time. Now he's throwing hard. That's a recipe for disaster. And I just think it kind of ignored some of the quiet buildup of innings that he had in the past. And last year, like, his velocity was actually down over the course of the season. But I think that was partly him saying that he doesn't want to throw every pitch max effort. It's something Jacob deGrom has struggled with, dealing with his various injuries. And so that makes me feel a little good about it. So yeah, I think like the A health grade is, I'm paying really close attention to it, because if he gets hurt, maybe I won't get into, I'll just be a little more cautious even next year. But once I saw that, it kind of put it over the hump for me, because the skills I think are very, very good. And they belong in this tier.
Yeah, he kind of gets knocked for he kind of has a whip issue occasionally on some games, but we don't that has no effect on us here at Underdog. So I think we can just completely ignore that one downside. Kind of going like Corbin Burns, next is Garrett Cole, a guy who we've seen the top level of his career seems like it's come and gone. Still a really effective guy. He's also reduced the strikeouts the last few years. His last Cy Young award 2 years ago seems like it was kind of a nice job previously, but award. But this year he's here at ADP 64 in the 6th round. I I'm fine getting to a little bit of Cole, but I'm not overly excited about it.
Yeah, I think he, for me, when I made like my own ranks, I was trying to put some tiers together. Like, I had him at the back of tier 1. I kept him in tier 1 out of respect for everything he's done in his career, and how he has, he's, even like as he's declined, it's been pretty graceful. But at the same time, I had him at the back of the tier because he's a different pitcher now. If you look at his stats from like 2019, obviously everyone's stats from them would be different, but it is insane the amount of strikeouts he was getting, and the walks he was limiting, and the velocity he was thrown at, and how much he was leaning on his four-seam fastball. Whereas like when he won the Cy Young, the whole storyline was he had added this cutter, which like worsened his four-seam fastball. That's one of the things you have to do as an aging pitcher to keep hitters off balance and keep them from guessing. And so on and so forth. And so, and then you add in the elbow thing from last year. I think he's a different pitcher now. So like my only advice would be, don't draft Corbin or Garrett Cole thinking that you're getting, absolute apex, 2021 possibility Garrett Cole. Yeah, I just think he's a different pitcher now. And I think I want to acknowledge that before it's too late, sort of thing.
Yeah. Blake Snell is next. Here we start the other hot topic in fantasy baseball, but almost more so in Underdog and Best Ball, when we start talking about 2-start weeks, and we start getting into the conversation about 6-man rotations, limiting the amount of 2-start weeks. We're playing, as the underdog playoff is built, and the rules of the game. We are hoping for as many 2-start weeks in these playoff rounds. So I think, from Blake Snell and every Dodgers pitcher from on, I think is suppressed a bit in ADP because of this, looming threat of not having them in the playoffs be really impactful when we need them. But we've seen now, Snell going from that, how do you only pitch 4 innings a game, and kind of just shaking that, archetype or whatever off of him, and just being dominant and now he's going to have Dodger wins behind him. So seems like a great play, but I guess in general, maybe what do you think about Dodgers pitchers in Underdog and then Snell also?
Yeah, the 2-start thing is something I've tried thinking about a lot this offseason, and it's so hard because, we could say the Dodgers are gonna go 6-man all year, but then in that playoff week, maybe someone has a minor injury, so they skip a start, and then Snell gets that 2nd start anyways because they just bumped him up a day. Like, there's so many things like that that could happen that I've tried just to, like, not factor that in too much and yeah, just try to, draft kind of the best pitchers and let the schedule stuff set out because it's just going to be so much madness and unpredictability within that. I don't know. The only other thing I have to say about Snell is just the yo-yoing of the past few years. I feel like I've been wrong every step of the way, and if it's good enough for the Dodgers, it's good enough for me. I'm just in on Snell for what I'm gonna do is, and this is something I've been employing in fantasy and across all formats and across multiple sports as well, but is just being willing to say I'm kind of in on this player going forward, and if things go wrong for one reason or another, like I'm not necessarily good at abandoning ship. So at this point, like I'm kind of just in on Snell. I can't imagine that there's going to be like I imagine just kind of being in on him the next few years, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm done with the wild ups and downs of fading him while he's Cy Young worthy, and then being all in on him when he's not getting a contract on the open market.
Yeah, I get what you're saying there. And another guy, he's at 156 here. If he hits 180, he's going to be more valuable on this list than you know the guys above him likely. Chris Sale, Cy Young winner. We saw finally the Chris Sale season. A guy who's had a ton of down seasons due to health, various wacky things like bicycle accidents and just all over the place. Um, yeah, I mean, he's projected here for 154. I don't know what he got to last year because I think it's important to note that at the end of the season when the Braves needed him, he was actually not really able to pitch. He had some shoulder stuff, so he did get to 177 innings here. So I think a lot of people are scared again on Chris Sale, even though he showed what he can do in 177 innings.
Yeah, and I think, innings wise, his margin for error is just going to be smaller than someone like, again, like Logan Webb, who I'll just keep using as the example. And so I think that it's so funny the order of operations things happen. It was actually really weird when he wasn't starting at the end of the year, and I forget the exact date, but there was something he only had made like one start in the last 5 weeks, or I don't have my numbers up in front of me, but I do remember it being weird. And then he wasn't on like the playoff roster, even though they basically needed him to win all those games. And if that type of thing was happening in April when everyone was paying attention, the whole narrative this offseason about Sale would be different. He already pitched a spring training game, so he's fine. There's no big mystery going on heading into 2025. I feel like a lot of people are hand waving that away because it came at the end of the year. But if that happened in May, he probably would have been out for like 2 or 3 months. And again, just the whole narrative would have been different.
Yeah, I can see someone coming up with both narratives going into the season for him. I don't think I'm getting too. I think I'm on the concern side of the narrative. All right, next up, now we're at about ADP 74. We're just getting into round 7 of the draft, and we have Aaron Nola, kind of up and down, but also kind of a model of consistency. I don't know. What do you think about Aaron Nola? Kind of a peak season again last year. If you go by underdog scoring, especially.
I love the up and down model of consistency. That's like something I would make for a title for an article. But I know exactly what you mean by it. And yeah, he is kind of, he's very boring. Actually, we just got done talking about Reagans and Snell and Sale, and Aaron Nola just does not have that feeling when you draft him of like, oh my goodness, this guy could win me the finals sort of feeling. But I do think he represents a very important, again, I mentioned being really into pitcher prototypes and profiles and all that. And he's just this bulky, safe, and when I say safe, I mean safe that I just trust that he's going to go out there and give innings. Of course, like I said before, any pitcher can get hurt at any time. But what I tried doing in drafts nowadays is for underdog teams, like I want multiple guys like Nola and Webb, and I'm trying to think, who else, like Bailey Ober types, guys that I just really trust to get through the season and be there every week. So if my Blake Snell isn't pitching that week because he has a minor injury, that I have someone. I don't want to draft 6 Chris Sale profiles. And so I think just finding the right mix and match with the Nola profile is a really important part of understanding how to build pitching staffs in this format.
Yeah. I've leaned the other direction this year. I think I've been hanging out with Chris too much as we go on. Some of my other targets will be very Chris-like. So, I'm avoiding the Nola types more so this season. All right, we made it to slide 2. Pitcher 13 is Pablo Lopez, ADP 79. I mean, he's Pablo Lopez. There's not a lot to say about Pablo Lopez. I like him. I take him quite a bit.
Yeah, I was just pulling up a sheet that I had here for him. He was one of the biggest Sierra minus ERA underperformers to start last year, and then it ultimately corrected, but the season just ran out kind of before he had a chance to really fix his ERA. So if you look at that from last year, it's going to seem high, but I would try to look past that because he really did, kind of he overcame those issues. Like not every pitcher, I think it's sometimes taken for granted just because we drafted him high in fantasy that he was definitely going to eventually figure out, because not every pitcher does, and he did. This feels a little high. I think it's really hard to separate in this range. So yeah, I'm kind of bucketing him with a Nola type as just, someone I don't necessarily have something bad to say about, but also just doesn't have, those loud skills that make me think, man, like I need to get enough of this particular person.
Yeah. I just think, yeah, he can be better than he was last year with the down period of the season. Michael King, finally came to fruition, converted from bullpen to a starter, comes to the Padres from the Yankees. I mean, we saw what we wanted last year, and it just feels like, I don't know, feels good this year again.
Yeah, this range is, I for all these pitchers, I try to have some sort of angle to bring to the table, whether it's something about their advanced stats or the way I'm viewing them in the grand scheme of the rest of the player pool. But this range is kind of just like a little bit of meat and potatoes for me, where it's, you said we're in round 7, 8 right now, round 7 with these next few names, and I do think it's like overkill to just like keep pounding 7, 8, 9 straight hitters. At least that's the way I was feeling in the admin draft that I was doing. And so this range, like, yeah, if I take a Michael King right now and that'll free me up to take more of an upside pitcher later on, that's fine. It's kind of just like a move the line sort of pick for me. Not someone who I think is necessarily, absent of just, another phenomenal season and a bunch of other injuries amongst those around him. Not someone I think is going to separate from this part of the draft.
Yeah, it's good that you say that, because we are hitting this eighth round where we see a bunch of pitchers going. So it is the general feeling for everyone. This is when they're starting to shop for pitchers. Framber Valdez is next at ADP 83, the 15th pitcher off the board, and he is my meat and potatoes often. I am starting with Framber very often. I think that while we talk about him, I'm going to pull up the slide that image that you got, because he is number one here along with Zach Wheeler, but going a lot later. This is 3-year quality start percentage. So you want to just explain what that is and why you had grabbed this graphic?
I'm just cracking up at the amount of like black space around the screen grab. It makes it seem so important, and then it's so this little screenshot from one of my spreadsheets.
We made it bigger.
Yeah, so I did, and I haven't published the article yet. I'm still finishing it, but I think quality starts is becoming enough of a fantasy stat. I mean, it's used in Underdog, and everyone knows what it is, but I don't think there's enough discussion around who's good at it. And again, you might say like, oh yeah, obviously Framber and Wheeler are the best, and you can probably guess who's not good at quality starts. But again, this is where I'm saying where like the edge in the player pool is not on the extremes, it's in the middle. Some of these names you're looking at might surprise you for some of the highest quality starts. And when I did some of this analysis, I came away very surprised. So what you see in front of you is just the past 3 years, how many starts they made, how many times did they get a quality start. Obviously, someone like Shota or Skeens is on here. They only have 1 year. In my full spreadsheet, I have, the total amount of starts they made. So you can see, who has done this just for 1 year, who's done it over a longer time. But Framber and Wheeler have done this the past 2 years. And then, you go down the list and, okay, it's 70%, 69, 66. It seems clustered, but when you cross out Bieber because he's coming back from injuries, Lugo, that's a great stat for him, but he's got other issues. Shota and Skeens have only done it 1 year, and it just like the gap starts to become a little bit more wider. So yeah, quality starts. It's only one part of the equation for underdog scoring, but it's something that Framber is among the very best at.
Yeah, and I think for me, the thing I like about him in this range or in this kind of group of players is that he has this quality start, but he also has strikeouts to match. So like Logan Webb is they're very similar in my mind, but Logan Webb he doesn't have quite the strikeout totals that Framber does. And as much as we talk about quality start being a scoring factor, it does not have anywhere near the same impact on underdog scoring as just a lot of strikeouts. It's kind of like a cherry on top of a start kind of deal. Yeah, I think it's interesting. We do have a couple of guys coming back from injury on this list too that we'll be talking about. Yeah, this is super interesting. All right, let's pop back. Anything else you want to say about Framber?
No, I'm with you. I really like him. I'm blanking on the top of my head now if it's this year or next year, but I think he's a free agent coming up this year. And like I said, the opposite of Burns, I maybe shy away a tiny bit. I really do like betting on guys in free agent years. I don't know if I've just picked my spots right, but it felt like I've had, it's not a blanket statement. So to make, you don't want to be betting on Gleyber Torres last year, for instance. But yeah, I do think there's some times to pick your spots with some of these impending free agent guys, and just a little, like you said, like similar to the quality starts, a little cherry on top makes you feel good about taking them.
Yeah. All right. Next, Logan Gilbert, another one of these Mariners pitchers that talking about the
Kirby.
Cool. What's that?
You were saying before how they're all same. They're all the same to you.
Did I just say the same name, the wrong name.
And you said Gilbert.
George Kirby Gilbert. Anyway, yeah, that's embarrassing. All right. George Kirby of the Seattle Mariners. He has when we're looking here, he's our first red K per game guy. Last year he was the first he's the second Seattle Mariner pitcher off the board behind Castillo, I believe. What's your outlook on Kirby this year?
Yeah, no, I definitely the strikeouts per game, that's a really great point you made about the difference between that and then a quality start and a win. And yeah, I think I would Kirby still has that, like, I guess his upside is a little bit less, like 6 innings, 13 strikeouts, and I mean, it's more like 8 innings with 9 strikeouts, and then you get like the QSM win attached onto it. So he definitely fits that profile. Again, like I think it's okay to take, like some of these names are going to come up, like obviously in any single start or for the full season. Some of those guys, Strider, DeGrom, are going to have more upside than Kirby, but I don't mind, just taking like a good steady pitcher. It's not like like sometimes I feel like the lack of K upside, it makes it seem like everyone's Miles Michaelis. I think consistency of reaching a certain point threshold is still important. And so, yeah, I like him. He's a pass the baton guy. This whole range since we got on Nola, the Nola through Kirby, they're all very similar to me.
All right. So what makes you stop there at Yamamoto then?
Just that we haven't like seen him do it. He was used to pitching on a 6-day schedule. He did have a shoulder issue in the middle of the season. The skills were fantastic, but one thing I did this offseason too was for every pitcher, I kind of just looked at the recent innings and tried to make my own guess as to what I would guess for innings. And there's nothing scientific about that, but it does just stop and make you think like, okay, I have one season of Yamamoto in the majors. I want to say off the top of my head, it was like 90 innings or something. And so it was like, what am I going to, what would I guess him for? Does he have the ability to go 170? Of course he does. But when you got to put that one number down in your spreadsheet, it made me just like second guess his durability a little bit.
Yeah. I've been mostly out, and it's not a comfortable out because, like you said, the skills are amazing, and he in those 90 innings, which you got right on exactly 90 innings. So congratulations.
That's what I said. I've been in the lab a lot this off season.
I will be sending you your prize later, a set of steak knives. All right. Next, Logan Webb. Previous years, I liked his innings totals. I was all in. And then as I thought about it more this season, he just doesn't excite me. Like at this point, we've seen a bunch of years of a bunch of innings, and he does not have the strikeouts really to match, as I said earlier, comparing him to Fromber. He has the quality starts there, the innings. So I guess my concern is what happens the year that he doesn't get the innings for, minor injuries, major, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that I play in like a head-to-head categories league with quality starts instead of wins, and I have such a bias towards Webb in that league. It's just getting a quality start almost every time out is so valuable. So maybe some of that bias is leaking over into this analysis where, again, you're preaching the importance of strikeouts. So that to me sounds like, something I like to say in fantasy because I play all sorts of, and I think a lot of people should play redraft and dynasty and best ball and points leagues and categories and roto. And, I like mixing it up in that way. And this is probably just the one format where you don't need to take Logan Webb because it's going to be his worst format. And I don't think like looking at the names coming up behind him that we're getting that enough of a discount perhaps.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So we're getting into Spencer Strider now. Let's. I guess
is this a Chris pick?
This is absolutely a Chris pick. I'm at 20% at the moment of Spencer Strider. As the news has gotten better and better each time you hear about him in spring, I think he's moving up. Everybody wants to, I think we still are in the realm of possibility of a month missed of the season. But at this point, I'm feeling comfortable taking him as my SP2 if I take, a Fromber or a King or a Pablo Lopez, someone that I know is going to be there, or freak injury aside, is going to be there at the start to, hold the top of my rotation, and then, have the Strider bomb when, he's there. Obviously, still a ton of questions of what he looks like in terms of abilities when he's coming back from a second well, I guess this was the internal brace, but he had previously had a Tommy John. But when you talk about pitchers that know their body and like are obsessed with pitching, like the doubt I have that this person specifically is going to come back and not be able to figure it out is a lot lower.
I really like the bull case for it. I think it, based off what you've said, it'd be impossible for me to match your and Chris's enthusiasm, but I definitely share it. I really like the idea of this guy he was going in the skiing scuba range last year, and like you said, it wasn't. I think so often again, the whole stuff I was talking about injuries, about really understanding, what the injury was, what have the updates been like, because I think the most important updates aren't the ones that go around, get shared in every Discord, and uh, you know that pop up on the ESPN breaking news alerts and all that sort of stuff. It's some of the most important injury updates are just buried in beat writer articles, and it's that it's the steps along the way. And so I think all that information is really important to follow, and it's hard to closely track, but I like, as someone whose job it is to kind of track some of that stuff. There's been no, like, everything for Strider has been perfect since his surgery, and like you said, it was the internal brace instead of a Tommy John. So if you could like prescribe betting on someone coming back from an elbow surgery, it would basically be this is the best way I can put it. And like the way you said about you might miss the first months of the season, but then you got this Strider bomb. It's like funny. Like I almost view him as like maybe having a similar number of innings as Chris Sale, but Sale's going to start the season. I'm not confident he's going to finish it. Whereas Strider, I feel like he's getting, held back to make sure he's available for our underdog finals weeks. And that there's a million things that could change in of those two assumptions I just made.
Yeah.
But that's how it feels on paper going into the year.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we have Roki Sasaki, the next Dodgers pitcher, fresh from Japan. I have too many red flags on him. Potential 6-man. First year from Japan. Injuries the last 3 years or whatever in Japan, limiting his time. Like I just can't get there.
This is the biggest fade of the night so far by far. Like something that I would be comfortable having 0% of at this price.
Yeah. So I guess the thing is though is that he, with the volatility and it's not really a secret, he is a guy that although he's here, we're at now ADP 93, he can fall like in a draft if everybody is of the same mind. So looking at it, it looks like I have two of my 30 some dingers with him, and I would imagine those were just he fell down a round or two, and I'll grab him
Yeah,
because
it's not like you can't take him.
if
Definitely.
if you're talking about guys that could be going in the first round next year, the skills there, we haven't seen him against. Well, outside of the World Baseball Classic, recently we haven't seen him match up, but the skills are there.
For sure. And again, it could be the type thing he goes nuts the week of the finals, and I think that could be it, sort of thing. But just looking at it from a little bit more of a season long perspective, and just really like when he came over, reading every single last thing I could about him to understand his injury history, why his stuff wasn't as good last year, the difference in his pitch arsenal from the World Baseball Classic to now, since he got to the Dodgers. What are they saying? Is he hitting the ground running? Are they going to have a plan to keep him like stretched out? Is he all that stuff it's just going to be a fade for me. There's just too much working against him. If he's talented enough to break through it all and be in the Cy Young conversation, then all the credit to him. But I mean, even like look at Shota going, like think about how good Shota was last year, and if Sasaki was that good, that would just be such a home run, and you can get Shota a few pitchers after him.
Yeah. All right, Jacob DeGrom here. I'm another Chris pick. I'm at 20% on him too. Um, the bat here has 110 innings on him. Like, I feel like this conversation is played out at this point. It's pretty simple. Jacob DeGrom has never stayed healthy. Well, since the last 4 or 5 years, I don't even know exactly, but it's been a while since we've had a healthy Jacob DeGrom. He's older. He's getting paid a lot of money. They're going to need him. They don't exactly have a super depth. The Rangers want to compete, and I don't know. Anybody's guess is as good as mine, or any projection system as how many innings he's going to survive.
This is where when again we're talking round 8 right now. So like for these Strider DeGrom bets, which you could argue are as good as the Glass Now sale bets, up top for where we were talking, like to start your draft with theoretically 7 straight hitters and then to take Jacob DeGrom as your ace feels like it shouldn't be a thing. And so I'm very in on DeGrom at this price, even more than Strider, because he came back at the end of last year. And I shouldn't say more than Strider. I love them both equally. But for whatever reason, when I was doing my admin drafts, I felt like the DeGrom ADP was maybe even a little bit later. And it just really stood out to me. It popped. I like that he is coming back off surgery. I feel like Glass Now got through like 200 innings before he started having issues again. So I feel like we're getting that fresh runway, and I think that matters versus literally the next name on this list. We'll get to in a sec, but yeah, if there's ever a season to buy into him, it's this one. It's things are as lined up as they could be with fresh off an elbow surgery.
Yeah, and I think there's you want him to be good again, right? Everybody wants to see another great Jacob DeGrom season. Again, he's when we talk about pitcher risk, though, he's, and you mentioned earlier, he's the guy that's always going max. He's never had, or since he's had the increase in velocity from the earlier part of his career when he stepped it up, he's always been top end of the velo. Doesn't know how to turn it off, which is scary. All right, so I know you have something specifically for Hunter Green here, so let's pull that up. This is the other one.
This is such a fascinating range of the draft. I think with some of the profiles are really interesting to discuss after we got through all those boring Logan Webb, Aaron Nola types.
Yes, yeah.
But
sell me on Hunter Green, I think, because I have none right now. And if you made a table for him, I'm scared that that's been a big mistake.
No, I made a table for him to show how bad of a pick he is at this point.
Oh, okay. All right. Handshake emoji.
I called Sasaki the biggest fade, and Hunter Green's like pretty equal for me. So I said I've been in the lab this offseason. I built myself just finding all sorts of pitching stats. I needed them all in one place. I needed to be able to type in a player's name and have everything populate that I would want to see, and then be able to mix it around so I can isolate at the exact things I want to look at. And here's kind of the Hunter Green story from the past 3 years. Sierra, which is very similar to strikeout minus walk in terms of being an ERA predictor that you talked about, just trying to simplify things. The story for him the first 2 years was that he kept underperforming. His Sierra is really good. Then you look one column to the right, his ERA is really high. Why is that? Well, look at all those homers he's given up. Look how high his batting average on ball in play is. And then you look at this year, and his underlying skills in some ways, stayed the same and got a little worse. But then he dramatically overperformed. And I want to use this opportunity to say that Sierra is not like the end all be all, just like Stuff Plus isn't, just like strikeout minus walk isn't. Like none of that stuff you can look at as a single stat and say this is it. But when you add the proper context, I feel that this sort of analysis can become really powerful. I think the reason that Hunter Green ended up overperforming last year is because he added a pitch that he added a pitch that helped, prevent some of these issues. He always had great stuff, but the reason he would give up so many homers is he would be predictable or he didn't have enough pitches. And the splitter just unlocked everything for him. But I think he was such an obvious positive regression candidate coming to the year, and it went so far the other way that now he's such a negative regression candidate. And then I just want to add on top of that he did have an elbow injury last year that he went on the IL for and came back to make 2 very quick starts. But I haven't forgotten that. And at the time, it was really scary when he went for testing, and maybe he's fine. But that's the kind of like the opposite bet of DeGrom, whereas DeGrom had the surgery, and theoretically now he should be good to go. Whereas Green, I think there's a fear of mine that he's at an elevated risk of getting the surgery this year.
Oh, interesting. Okay. My fate is a lot simpler. I just don't like Cincinnati pitchers.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm saying, where he kind of like, if you look at that homer per 9, like that shouldn't exist for a Cincinnati pitcher.
Yeah.
It's just like too low. And so I don't think it's going back up to like 1.5, but something about like 1 maybe feels more right to me. So yeah, that was mainly it. I think he mostly overperformed last year, and then you add in the elbow thing, and in Cincinnati, it's just too much.
Yeah, I think we might get some hate mail for this one. I think there are still plenty of people that like Hunter Green, and they're in this format. They're taking the road games, and he can have a good.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
He can have a good game in Cincinnati too. Just harder to do. All right, last year I had identified Shota Monaga as someone I wanted to target as a guy who I felt like had a huge range of outcomes. He was going in, I don't know, 16 to 18. I think he moved up as the season came closer, but he was a mid late or a late, I don't know, somewhere between a mid and a late pitcher last year that it felt like to me could do what he did. And, he was here, or he could be, undraftable this year. So I got the right side of that variance. I'm kind of backing off because maybe I'm doing the opposite of what you said of, betting on someone consistently. But my bet last year wasn't on knowing what he was going to be. It was just knowing that he had a wide range potentially. But I'm happy if you're interested still in him at this cost, and based on what he did last year and what you see going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great call by you last year. Absolutely. And again, I think after the excitement of, Roki and DeGrom and Green and those guys, it kind of backed a little bit of steadiness here. And I just view him again as like whether he's my second starter or, maybe he's your first, or just like someone I can kind of count on to be there most of the time and to not be putting up zeros. I think that's like that wiggle room between maxing out for like strikeout upside and then not taking zeros is something that I haven't seen anyone put anything together of what like the right balance is between those two things. But when I think about the pitching prices this year, it's less so that like, oh my God, I can get Shota Monaga as my number 1 SP in the 8th round. And it's more that you can build deep staffs without investing early picks. But in order to build the deep staff, at some point you have to start taking them. And yeah, I think instead of going just full late round pitcher for me, like I don't mind like, okay, I'll start a rotation with Michael King and Shota Monaga. Is that, the sexiest start to a staff in the world? No, but that's just going to build me that bridge to then take a bunch of upside picks to come, of which we know there's going to be many. Yeah. So yeah, he's like a bridge pick, I'll call it.
Okay. Luis Castillo's next. At this point, we're at about ADP 98. He's the 24th pitcher. We're in the 9th round. Just we've seen a decline from Castillo. I've always been a fan. I like him in Seattle, but maybe I'm too scared. I don't know what does your what is behind the scenes on the last few seasons of Luis Castillo? Why hasn't it really lived up to what we hoped?
Definitely a little bit of aging on his part, of his stuff not playing as well. Uh, yeah, he's really durable though. Like you said, he's got the home park. He still has, I believe, single start upside. He does this thing every year. He starts slow and then he gets rolling for a while. Um,
Right, he's
yeah,
known for his temperature splits.
yeah, I think yeah, that too. And I think he's like I know it's not that much of a difference in ADP here, but yeah, like going that many pitchers after Logan Webb is I think he's another safe kind of bridge pick to get you to the next pitcher.
All right, we will bridge to the next slide here. All right, we are starting with Freddie Peralta here, ADP 102. Last year for me, I was saying I think he still has another step. And then he just has not been able to be a consistent from start to start sort of guy. Being the Brewers fan, I follow a lot of his starts, and it's always like, which version are we getting? Are we going to get the guy that fades in the second inning after having a lights out first inning, or is he going to be consistent? So I don't know. It's maybe I'm going too far in the other direction, and I should still be hoping for that next level, but it feels like he had his opportunity last year and didn't get there for me.
Yeah, he rated really low on that quality start analysis I did over the past few years. He has not performed. It's been like pretty below, like even below like some not so great pitchers. So I might be holding that against him too much for this format if we're talking a little bit more strikeouts. So yeah, kind of a fade for me. I think some of the quality start stuff too for me is like I do think having a really high rate of quality starts shows like a level of durability. It shows a level of being able to turn a lineup over ultimate time. And so I value the quality start stat more than just like the points that it'll get you there. But again, in this case, maybe that's a little too much. Obviously, any one start, two start week, he could strike out over 20 batters sort of thing. So
Yeah.
hard to fully fade because of that, but does seem there's definitely a lot of pitchers coming up that I'm as intrigued by or more so.
Yeah, that's a good call because I'm not getting to him. If he was going in the 10th or 11th, I would be getting to him. But there's guys in the 10th and 11th that I see similar outcomes to. All right, Zach Gallen, a notable. We haven't talked too much about this stuff, but go here to his last 3 seasons. He has been a notable loser of stuff. I don't know. What do you think about that, and just where he's at? Like, we're not too far out of Zach Gallen as a top tier ace kind of mindset, but he has not been there lately.
This might be unfair. It kind of just strikes me as like on the Kevin Gossman timeline of he had this run of flirting with, low end ace status, but it was never like a crazy stuff standout. And as you get a little bit older, you just lose a little bit of stuff and it just makes a big impact. So that's nothing scientific about what I just said. That's just all the vibes I've gotten from him. He's always, pretty healthy. I know he missed a little bit of time last year, but his health grade, according to Jeff Zimmerman, is still very good. And he's, solid. I'm definitely more comfortable fading him than, like Freddie Peralta, for instance, just talking about that upside of, who could break me for not having him sort of thing.
Yeah. Hunter Brown is next, ADP 106. Yeah, and we're still in the 9th round. He's the 26th pitcher, I guess. He's tied with Zach Gallen technically here. I am kind of surprised looking across. I've been blindly taking Hunter Brown as just a bet on the ascension that we saw over the course of last season continuing. But you look at his numbers here; they look pretty similar to Zach Gallen. So maybe I'm blinded by having to having made a bet on him last year and it turning around. But I've also within the broader fantasy landscape, people have talked about how his swinging strike rate didn't really match the actual strike rate, even if he did, have this improvement over the season. So I guess what's your take on that, and just Hunter Brown in after the kind of the breakout season?
Probably my favorite pick so far on the board. I think of these types that I'm seeming to, like having a few of the Nolas and the Kirbys and the Gallons, I guess we can put in there now, but he should be going, kind of where Kirby's going. I think like those two are very similar to me. Hunter Brownie has an exceptional health grade. What I was talking about before and Hunter Green and being able to, what leads to efficiency in terms of Sierra minus ERA. Hunter Brown is, I would consider him similar. He added a pitch last year, just like Hunter Green did. And in 2023, just like Hunter Green, Hunter Brown's Sierra was way better than his ERA. That's part of why he was, any sort of breakout pick going into last year. And then what we saw is once he added the sinker, it gave him that third pitch to allow him to not severely underperform his efficiency. I don't know if I'm still explaining that as well as I want to yet. And there's a couple more pitchers on this topic, on that topic that we'll get to eventually. So I'll try to bring that back and keep recycling that take till I get it right. But it makes sense in my head. And yeah, he added a pitch and he became a different pitcher. But unlike Hunter Green, he didn't overperform in all these other areas. And then the last thing I would say about like the projections of him versus Gallen is it's absolutely within the range of outcomes. Gallen could just straight up be better than him, of course. But it's just like, yeah, you look at the age and, if their careers are going to go certain directions, it's just I think that ceiling's a lot higher for Brown just from that one factor.
Okay. All right. Another young guy, kind of a guy who I don't know that he had much. I mean, I had heard Hunter Brown's name before, but up to last year, I had never heard of Spencer Schwellenbach's name. I know you're a little bit deeper in Dynasty and that sort of other fantasy. Was he a surprise to you as much last year as it was to me?
Definitely he was. I forget if I sent a graphic for him or not. I might not have ended up sending it and gone with someone else. That's totally okay if that was on me.
Is it the movement profile?
Yes.
Yes. We have that.
And so talking about all these profiles, like what's a risky profile versus what's not. And I think that there's like a little bit of, some would view Schwellenbach in disbelief, like it can't be that good sort of thing. And I'm just been, there's so much good pitching content out there on the internet. You and I, we've referenced Enos Harris on the show. I watch a lot of Lance Brzezowski stuff, just like random Twitter accounts I come across. I can't even think who else of, a lot of Fangraphs articles. There's just so much. And so
TJ Stats on earlier this season.
Oh.
Yeah, he's another big one out there.
No, absolutely. And so anyways, I've been looking at everyone's talking about these things they put on Savant where you can see which way the pitches are moving. I'm not going to pretend to be the best in the world at explaining what this means, but first of all, he has 6 pitches. Like this is a young kid who has so many pitches already. It feels like the industry the past couple of years, it was this whole, throw your best pitch as often as you can and chase stuff. And that's all that matters. And now the trend is have as many pitches as possible. It's just funny how like things change like that. But Schwellenbach is he hits every, quadrant of the strike zone. His pitches move every direction you'd want them to. That's kind of what this chart is telling us. And again, even just like visually seeing how many pitches he has. And I just want to emphasize it's good that they're kind of like scattered throughout here. It means his pitches are doing different things, and it becomes impossible to guess. So who knows if he's going to make it through 170 innings this year? But if he does, I'm betting that they're going to be good ones.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. How quickly things have changed between throw your best pitches only a few years back, with all the data and stuff. As the data has like exponentially increased, it feels like the time for what you want out of a pitcher is changing even faster. I do have a sustainability of baseball sort of question. What the where does it end? Like, how do you at some point are you gonna is every year going to be different because we have change? I don't know. It's just an interesting thing, I think, in general in the game of baseball right now, and sports in general, not just baseball.
I think it's an example of like in the NFL, people always talk about how cyclical, the league is with offensive design and then defensive coverage is off that, like the cover two stuff. There've been years in the past where there was a lot of cover two, and it's, people figure out how to beat it. And then, so I don't know, some of that stuff I kind of take over to baseball where, yeah, it's always evolving. And I think that's why I think it's really important to understand, like I've been talking a little bit about trying to look at these players from every possible angle of projections versus past performance versus which each projection system says about that player versus the surface level stats and the advanced numbers. And yeah, just trying to get the most clear picture I possibly can. I think that will prove to be timeless analysis regardless of what else is going on.
I don't know that. Okay, so I have an okay amount of Schellenbach. He's not a name that I remember clicking, but apparently I am. All right, Max Fried is next. Now a Yankee, longtime Brave, ADP 110. We're in the 10th round now. A name that I'm skipping over for the other names around him, but I'm happy to hear otherwise, that maybe I should go back and re-examine Max.
I spend so much time looking at advanced stats. That's why I always try to mention that I also do look at the surface level stats, because I feel like you can sometimes get buried underneath. But he just always beats his advanced stats, and I spend so much time looking at those that I just always think lesser of him than I should. And in one of these years, he's not gonna beat those, but it could be another 5 years from now. And yeah, you just add in first year of a big contract in New York. I feel like we've seen this, play out so many times before. I'm okay having a soft fade here. But I'm also fine with it.
Yeah. All right. Now we got Tyler Glasnow. One of those baseball names that just sort of fits with their profile. Let's see. We got 132 innings projected. I mean, another guy that I feel like is maybe not over talked about, but the talking points about.
Everyone has a stance already.
Yeah. So what is your stance?
I'm dumbfounded at the ADP more than anything. Why does he not go where Chris Sale goes, or Spencer Strider? I'm like kind of seriously asking. I know it's only a couple, maybe 2-3 rounds between some of those names, but I'm genuinely curious why he doesn't go where those guys go.
Yeah. So for me, it's been, you talk about Dodgers pitchers. I'm just grabbing the cheapest one. If you're talking about all these guys with the 6-man rotation problems, whatever, and all of them have high upside, why not? I see no reason why Tyler Glasnow can't be the best performer out of those guys.
I know again, obviously, like I asked that question, why doesn't he go with those other guys? Someone would say he's injury prone. Well, those other guys are too. And I know that Glasnow had a quote this offseason saying like his elbow doesn't hurt when he throws, or it only hurts when I throw. And I get all that. And no, I'm not betting on him staying healthy. I don't know. There seems to be a real disconnect between his ADP versus some of the other injury prone guys. I'm historically out on Glass now. If we talked about him at pitcher 9 overall, I'd probably be, throwing a lot more, reasons for caution out there. But at this price, based on what the market is telling me, that we're selling out so high for a Freddie Peralta type because he has good strikeouts per game, and yet we're not pushing up Glass now after what he just did. It feels like, yeah, it feels like a real buying opportunity. Again, mainly because of the price. Obviously, he could get hurt and, and screw us all, but yeah, that price is truly wild to me.
Excellent. Next up, Grayson Rodriguez, ADP 115. Now we're in the 10th round. He's the 31st pitcher off the board. He's a guy that, listening to this show in years past, we've been high on. I mean, we have now seen, part of what I liked about him last year was I thought he had the potential of having good health outcomes or having the body type of a consistent innings eater, but we haven't yet seen it, Brendan.
Yeah, and last year there was a minor shoulder thing. Then there was the lat thing. He had the lat issue when he was a prospect, so don't love that same issue popping up a second time. He didn't end the season healthy, so don't love that either. But I just wrote about him for Baseball America, actually, as one of my favorite picks in fantasy this season. And what I said was that there's nothing. Again, you look at the surface level stats and the advanced stats. There's nothing there that would just make you say, oh, he's due for positive aggression or anything. I've just been watching him pitch a lot. I know some of the pitching gurus just really like that he has such a wide arsenal already. I kind of view him. I know he's had a little bit of injury stuff, but I still view him as safe for some reason. At least that the skills are safe. And so to me, he's kind of like a Hunter Brown. Like he's a little bit less, durable of a Hunter Brown, where I kind of like him as like, a SP2 or 3, but I still think there's that upside for SP1.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of downplayed it, that maybe I wasn't grabbing him, but yeah, I'm still back. I'm back in there, hoping for that 170 inning season out of him. All right. Kevin Gausman is next. You mentioned him earlier. I forget what in reference to, but a guy who, another notable loser in stuff over year, kind of a 2-pitch guy. I don't know. I'm kind of buying back in at this price. I feel like he's not going to hurt me. I guess is maybe not what I want. Maybe not the best resounding sales pitch, but I don't feel like he's going to hurt me at this price. Where, as last year, where he was going, he did hurt you.
Yeah, and I think I've been talking a lot tonight about being willing to buy in on Logan Webb and all those types, and you could say, hey, this is that. I'm actually way out on Kevin Gausman at this price. Again, I think if I would list my 3 biggest fades so far of the night, it was Roki, Hunter Green, and then Gausman would be third for me so far. And it's just that he's aging, and the drop off we saw last year was severe enough. I want to give him credit or give him the benefit of the doubt because he did have I think it was a shoulder injury in spring training, and I don't think he pitched at all in spring, or maybe it was like one start, and he was kind of like, okay, well, the season's starting, so I'm going to give it a go right now. And that obviously probably is what led to the diminished stuff. The question is, does that just return, or does pitching however many innings he threw last year through that shoulder injury I was trying to build up through the season, is that just going to be part of his story of decline? And so yeah, I know I'm being a little bit more pessimistic than maybe you were hoping for, but it is one that I could see the floor dropping off, where this is like a 5-6 ERA sort of season and just a disaster scenario.
Okay.
Most likely, it's probably just he's fine, regresses a little bit more, and next year is thought of as in his teammates like a Chris Bassett, Jose Barrios sort of way.
Yeah, there. It is tough. He has teammates on a similar trajectory, so yeah, it's easy to tell that
To
story.
make that comparison, yeah.
Yeah, and as poor as this season, the indicators are almost worse than what we did get out of him. So it does make sense. And I'm looking here, he had 31 starts, 31 starts, 31 starts, 33 starts, and maybe, that and now at age 34 is just, worn down. So yeah, you can tell a lot of stories that the decline is here for him. I think you mentioned Bailey Ober earlier. ADP about 120. Now we're in round 11. It sounds like you are in on him. So what's your sales pitch there?
I really like Bailey Ober, but this might be some of my category bias falling over because he's definitely not like the high strikeout type, but he's super durable. He doesn't walk guys. I think he's proven himself in terms of still possessing some stretches of real upside, and it's not that every start is 6 2/3 but 4 runs sort of thing. And so yeah, I think this is another situation where this is his worst format. So if you play a lot of different formats, just get your Bailey Ober in a roto league because he's going to be more valuable in that.
All right. Yeah, looking at him, like looking at his projection here next to Kevin Gausman is like, I should probably have swapped those two guys in most of the, I have a couple of Bailey Ober and more Gausman, and maybe I'm wrong there, and I need to correct that going forward. Sonny Gray here is next. Is he going to be a Cardinal for the whole season? Probably not. But he's at ADP 124. On this list, on this slide, he's up there in terms of Ks per game. We like that. I guess, where are you at on Sonny Gray, as he kind of has navigated a lot of seasons of various ailments too?
Yeah, he's actually my one of my favorite picks so far that we've talked about tonight. And one of the biggest reasons, again, just one of the studies I read this season was about predicting ERA for the next year, and it's nothing crazy. I think we all know that ERA isn't a great predictor of itself, but just kind of like not so much just like tell me what the best predictor is, but like what are the different ERA estimators actually tell you all this stuff. And I put a lot of time into that and thought deeply about it on these cold winter days, and like bundled up inside all winter. And then I started building that database I talked about of just getting a bunch of pitcher stats that I need to see all together in one place, and kind of went through doing some soft ranks and was just astounded by some of Sonny Gray's underlying numbers from last season. And from what I can tell from the legit studies I've done, not just a thread I saw on Twitter, it feels like that's what a lot of people default to nowadays. But
Guilty.
yeah, I really believe in Sonny Gray this year. So he'll probably have a minor IL stint at one point. That's totally fine by me as long as it doesn't come in the playoffs. But skills wise, I don't think he's gotten enough credit for how much he's continued to evolve and add pitches and become a real leader for the entire Cardinals organization. There were stories when he first got there that he was teaching them about pitch grips and his sweeper and all this sort of stuff. So
yeah,
I'm a big fan of his.
All right. Next one, Tanner Bybee. I don't know. He's very under the radar. I guess he's another name I click and I don't really think about it too much here. It just seems a meat and potatoes guy at this point too.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have a ton else to add on him. He has a very good health grade. that I have in my numbers. He performs poorly in quality starts. It's not the biggest deal in the world. Kind of Bailey Oberish in some ways. And yeah, I think the only thing I would push back against Bobby with, I think there's a tendency that people say because he's young, he has upside, and that's very fair. Like, I just talked about Hunter Brown and Schwellenbach and Grayson in that regard. I just think it's a different profile, and I don't think his actual profile has upside the way it does for the other guys. So I think because he's young, he sometimes gets pushed up a little bit, but that's the only thing I would have to say about him.
Okay. All right. Now, as far as pitchers go that we've talked about tonight, we have Bryce Miller next, who is the guy I have drafted the most of the names we've talked about. End of round 11 here, ADP 127. Just a guy, you're talking about Schwellenbach, just a guy with a bunch of pitches that I think because of that has an upside to him. The K per game doesn't look great when you put him next to some of these other guys, like even Bybee. But between the home park and the wide arsenal, and I mentioned TJ Stats when he was on here. He was high on Bryce Miller, so maybe I'm going off. I've fed a little bit too high off of that, but Bryce Miller is I'm all over this year.
Bryce Miller is always going to be one of my favorite pitchers ever because he was so important to my understanding of some of these metrics that we talk about all the time, and Stuff Plus has just been such a talking point in both in baseball and especially in the fantasy baseball world, honestly. And when he first came up, his first start in the majors, I remember watching it on MLB TV and falling out of my chair for not like having him already stashed in every league. And but it was a true. And then all the Stuff Plus numbers come out and they're insane, and people are saying the fastball, it's the best fastball, and all this sort of stuff. And this is kind of a good way, if it's okay to just wax poetic about Bryce Miller for a minute here. I have a few different angles, and I feel like it'll wrap up a lot of what we've talked through about some of these pitchers so far. And so anyway, so from the stuff side of it, it was this feeling of, wow, this pitcher came out of nowhere. Like he was Schwellenbach in a lot of ways for that season. He definitely, in deeper leagues had a little bit of hype or whatnot, but for the most part, he came up and no one expected that for what he did. And that was to me something I took really seriously, is how quickly a pitcher can change their talent level or come out of nowhere in a way that I just don't think happens as much for hitters. And that shaped a lot of how I've played fantasy the past couple of years and in all formats. And then I think Bryce Miller is also important to talk about because he is, again, someone like the Hunter Green, Hunter Brown, someone who underperformed in 2023. Bryce Miller, he was severely underperforming his expected stats, and everyone said his stuff's so amazing, his strikeout minus walk is so good, why isn't the ERA good? And you would say, well, he's given up a bunch of homers or that sort of stuff. It's like, okay, and he added pitches, and now he was able to not underperform those expected stats, or he was able to be efficient actually, because I think having a wide arsenal, I think that's the point I've been trying to make with all these guys, is that the wider your arsenal, the more wiggle room you have where I can buy into someone overperforming their ERA estimator. Max Fried, he has so many pitches. We just talked about him as someone who always overperforms his expected stats, and it's because he has so many pitches. They hit every quadrant of the strike zone, and that just leads to efficiency. Whereas if you're this two-pitch guy who has incredible stuff numbers and great K minus walk, but you have a homer problem, that's because you're predictable, and that's because you don't have the pitches to allow you to be efficient. And so anyways, that Bryce Miller, he added pitches. He's adding more pitches this offseason. All those Seattle guys are great at doing that and really understanding pitching in general. And so I'm a big fan. I think the way you described about taking the cheapest Dodger, I think you do the same thing with the Mariners. I know we haven't gotten to Brian Wu yet, but I kind of view the Mariners as, kind of a big four, and then Wu's after them. So you could start your staff in an underdog draft in round 10 and go Glass now Bryce Miller. That sounds like a pretty, not something I would do 100% of the time, but I would definitely try that out at least once.
Yeah, or even taking 3 of these guys here, and I'm doing that quite a bit. I don't think that's too out of what the field is doing either, but it feels good. All right, so we've done it. We've made it through the first chunk of pitchers. Brendan, any overall thoughts as I guess you kind of wrapped up there, but any other things overall as we go through, this top, 11 rounds or so?
I really like player analysis. It's becoming my favorite part of fantasy. I think the fantasy world is getting, a lot sharper and with a lot of macro stuff. And, I've kind of really tried to lean into, predicting player performance, which is always going to be extremely volatile and you're never going to have 100% hit rate. But I find that understanding of the profiles is the term I'll keep coming back to. But that's really helped me the past couple of years. And I'm really enjoying continuing to try to get better at it at least.
Yes, and that's why it's nice to have you on for some of these in-depth players, because my brain much goes more to the macro side of things, and I kind of just feed off other sources for a lot of my player and projections for my player takes. So
it's great info. I mean, what you guys and Badge Bros and Chris, and when you understand the underdog platform and how kind of the contests work, that's its own, really valuable skill. And I think the dream kind of best ball player would be marrying all those concepts. And I think if, I was someone who's trying to get better at best ball in general, I would view it kind of in two different ways like that, 2 areas that, everyone could continue getting better in, because some of the macro stuff I definitely don't understand to the same degree that you and Chris and everyone does.
And some of that's harder for you because you can't really draft the same amount.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. So we've done it. Pitcher episode number 1 is in the books. We will be back later this week on Friday with the second episode. And Brendan, you should be back for that. So look forward to that. We'll see just how many round 20 pitchers we can talk about. So for Brendan and myself, thank you for watching, and go out there and fill some drafts.